Hey there, welcome to Authentically Raw. I'm your host, Jayme Sinsmyr. Hello, today's guest is Jayme Sinsmyr. She is a missionary in Haiti and also a podcaster of New Clothes Podcast. And she's formerly a native in Michigan, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And how long have you been in Haiti?
I just celebrated my 5th year.
Wow, that is incredible. So I do want to have you share a little bit about what you do in Haiti first, but then we are going to have a conversation today about shame and forgiveness. So first, tell us why you're in Haiti and what you do.
So I have a ministry here in Haiti, and my husband and I run together. We work specifically with elementary and high school children. The statistics tell us that only 2 out of 10 children will make it all the way through high school. So we are focusing on the high school students right now, scholarshiping them for high school, but also programming them. We have an after-school program where we teach leadership, critical thinking, hands skills, life skills. Our goal is to help Haiti raise up leaders within itself so that it can change itself from within, and it will no longer one day need so much outside support. So that's kind of what we do here.
That's incredible. And for 5 years, you said?
I've lived here for 5 years. The first 2 years, I was still in my running stage, which we'll talk about a little bit. And I was not a missionary, and I didn't want to be a missionary. But I was a massage therapist. And so I just brought my practice over here to be in the warm sun. I had an organization that was running, but it didn't need me to be here. It was just more of a pipeline ministry. So I came here and set up my massage business, and that's how I got here. But Amazing. The last 3 years, yes, I have been full-time missions. It was much of a fight between the Lord and I, and it took me a long time to say I'm a missionary. It used to be like I'd cover my mouth with my hand, like look down. Not that I was ashamed, it just wasn't it's not who I thought I was or good enough to be, and so it was very hard. And so now I can say it, but there was a moment where I couldn't and where I fought it.
So let's go there, because you do have a story of shame and forgiveness. Mm-hmm. And you mentioned that the first 2 years you were, what did you say, running or?
Yeah, I was still in that process of healing. Okay. I probably moved here, if I would be honest, in running, leaving. Okay. So my story would be, I was married for about 21 years. The last 5 of that, 4 of it, maybe, I guess, I was in an affair. When I had the affair, I was in an affair with a narcissist, and completely lost my self-worth and my value. And we'll go on farther, but when somebody starts in an affair, there's definitely a lot of course, we start with secrets. We start with just liking somebody emotionally. It never usually starts with sex. I wasn't looking for an affair. I wasn't even necessarily unhappy, to be honest. So somebody had kind of came after me and started hitting some of those love languages that was mine. And I didn't realize how good that felt. My ex-husband was a good man. We spoke 2 different love languages. It doesn't mean he didn't love me. And once I stepped into that affair, however, I never felt like I could go back to my husband and give him a chance to forgive me. I felt too isolated, too alone. And so an affair, I like to describe as an addiction, because it's something that we need, that love, but we don't know. For me, at least, I couldn't go back to the place that was pure because I was now dirty. I messed up. I did something terrible. And so I had to keep going back to where I could receive it. And it was a long, slow road. It was a road that brought me into what I call my zombie years, where I feel like I was just a shell of a person. I became I remember looking at people and wondering if they actually saw me, because I was so, my spirit, my soul had shrunk so much that I really was, I don't know how else to say, a shell of a person. Like, I used to think of myself as these beady little eyes in the back of my head, looking through this deep tunnel to get out to where my eyes actually saw the world. And for somebody to really see who I was, they would have to look deep into my eyes to understand where I was. And it took me a long time. We ended up getting a divorce, and it was because I felt too much shame. I never gave him a chance to work through it, and I ran. And it took a long time. I did end up telling my ex-husband that I had the affair. But then it was still a few years yet before I was ready to really step into the grace, back into the grace of God. I grew up a Christian. I was a Christian all my life. How could I do this? Although there's one thing I would say, is that I never felt God stopping the chase. Through the whole time that I was in the affair, I still had these crazy blessings that would come out of nowhere from the Lord. And I would sense the Lord saying, I still love you. I'm still waiting for you to come back. I'm still using you. You're still mine. And I would sit and bawl in those moments when these huge blessings that I knew were from God were given to me. And I would wonder, God, don't you see what I'm doing? Don't you see what a bad person I am? I'm this, the Christian world, the non-Christian world, nobody likes an adulterer. I am the villain. I am the ugliest person. And that was really what I thought of myself. I tried very hard to make the outside of myself beautiful, while the inside was feeling very, very ugly, very, very disgusting. To be honest, I would have dreams. I would have poop dreams. And I know that sounds gross. And I looked it up, and it was like, if somebody had those type of dreams, it was because they thought of themselves so dirty on the inside that they couldn't get away from it. And that was my reality of I was filthy. I was filthy.
So when you started to feel this way, when the shame started to creep in about how much time had passed in the affair?
Well, I mean, it always started. It started right at the beginning. I had moments of like, oh Lord, don't let me walk down this road. And yet I didn't turn myself. Like, you can say it, but unless you actually do the action, he's going to give us that choice. And I gave into that battle somehow. I look back and I thought, how could I have ever done that?
Right.
But the reality is I did. And I can't go back. I can't go back and erase that. So
how did the truth come out? Did you reach a point where you decided to disclose the truth to your husband?
I disclosed the truth to my husband about 6 months after we were divorced, about 8 months, I guess. So I never said it before. So,
were you still in the relationship with the man, or did you end the relationship?
No, I was not. So the man I started with, I did finally break free from him. And in fact, as I went down, my whole story is we didn't live in the same area. So then he had mistresses on his side, because I was still married and could have my husband too. And I said, but I don't go back to my husband. Like, that's where we are. And so he had different ladies. So then because I felt in my story, I would tell you, like, I actually leveled out to where I said, Jayme, you're nothing more than an animal. Like, it's just you just need sex like an animal. You're not even human anymore, because he started having these other ladies, and I found out about it and I got really angry. And so then I decided I was going to have other men. And I had 2 other guys that I had no relationship with, only merely sexual. And so it was, when I got to that point, it was truly just an addiction. It was just truly, I had a need that needed met. I couldn't go back to where it was pure. And I went down and I allowed things, Jayme, to happen to me in those moments to do different type of sexual acts that I would not have probably done, allowed things to be done to me that I've had to go, when we get to the healing part, I've had to go through a lot of healing of just being demoralized myself.
Mm-hmm.
And it's hard because I allowed it to happen, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that self-forgiveness is something that takes a long time to get through. So,
well, I want to acknowledge you for your courage to speak up and share your story, because I think that there will be a lot of valuable lessons that people can really resonate with for healing in whatever area of their life, not even just adultery, but with carrying such deep shame around. Right. And then when we speak, more about your process of forgiveness. So how were you able to break free from first the affair?
I finally realized that it was just done with everybody. So I blocked the people that I was just having sexual relationships with. I said, I'm done. He kept, coming after, no, we're not done. And yes, we're done. I blocked him. So I blocked all those people out of my life, out of media, out of social media, out of everything. And I divorced my husband, and it was done. And so I, of course, was a very broken person. And so immediately out of my divorce, about a month later, I moved to Haiti, and I started a relationship. I started a relationship with my current husband. Right at the end of my divorce. I did know him before we were at the divorce, but we were already in the process. And I just jumped right in. 6 months later, I got married again. So I was unmarried for about 8 months, and then I jumped right in. And so we, of course, have our own struggle, and that's a whole nother story. God has done such redeeming work in our own marriage and built a powerful couple from a couple of pretty damaged people. But when we went in, that was there. So when I had gotten remarried, we were in our own struggle because we're two different broken people, two different divorced people, two different cultures. My husband is Haitian, and so much going on. And so I'm just crying out to the Lord at this point. It's like, I don't want to get a divorce again. I know I jumped in. What am I doing? And there was a Sunday we had gone to church, and there was a song that they sang, and it says, and then you called my name, and I ran out of that grave. And I just broke down and cried. And I could see him calling me, and I could see me running to him, because that's where I was. I was really just in a grave. I was just really, even in that point, I was still a zombie. Nobody knew what I had done. Nobody knew all the things I was struggling with emotionally, how much damage I had felt from my family, had done to my family, what I had done to myself, what I had done to my ex-husband. And I was buried under that load of guilt and shame. I truly was. And so to have that song speak so vividly to me, it was like the Holy Spirit said, run to me, run out of that grave. And in my mind, I did run out that day. But the reality is, in my mind, I ran out for that moment. But what I say now is I really just ran to the edge of the grave. I ran to the edge of the tomb, right? Like, I'm here, but it took me 2 years of, I would say, intense devotional time in the Bible, in health books, mental health books, to forgive myself. And I remember a time in the garden, and I would tell you, I would pray every morning, Lord, please forgive me for destroying my family. Please forgive me for what I did. Please forgive me, over and over and over again. And there was a Saturday, or one morning and I just really felt the Lord say to me, Jayme, I forgave you a long time ago. When are you going to forgive yourself?
Mm-hmm.
And I had to sit in that for a moment because that was so hard to forgive myself. And that began a new journey.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because when you punish yourself that way, that shame builds, and it's really hard to dig yourself out of that grave at that point.
Right.
What was your first steps as far as that redemption process? What did you do? Did you go tell your husband first? I know we have previously talked that it took you a while to tell kids, but how did that process of opening up and sharing the truth of the story, how'd that happen?
So I would say that was another couple of years. That was another couple of years. He finally said, I forgave myself. And so that was another step. I had stepped out of the grave, but I still had the secret, right? Nobody knows. And so with that secret, Satan still had control over me. So yes, I had forgiven myself, but I didn't trust anybody else with what I knew, right? Satan would say, well, if your kids knew, they wouldn't love you anymore. They would leave you and you would lose your kids. What would your parents think? They would be so ashamed of you. You know, I have stepped into ministry. What would your donors think if they knew this? What would the churches who know you, who are supporting you now, knew what you did back then? They knew your past.
That shame really thrives in secrecy.
It does. It does.
But the more we keep it secret, the more shame we get just riddled.
The more
with.
hope. Yeah, absolutely.
Got a grip on you.
I think that there's a verse in Revelations, I can't remember the exact verse, but it says that we overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the power of our testimony. And I think it is a twofold, because the blood of the Lamb is our forgiving. We have overcome, but the power sometimes really comes in that testimony. And so this last summer, in fact, when I walked out, when I finally forgave myself, going back to that time, I felt at that time the Lord saying, I want you to give me the story and allow me to use it. And I was like, no, God, how can I do that? You know that my kids will, again, all those lies that Satan was saying, your kids will leave you. Everybody will turn away from you. Nobody likes an adulteress. Like, you just need that big A on your shirt, right? And that's all I could think about, is I should be wearing this big A and walking around with my head down and, you know, and facing the reality of what the names people will be calling me. And because I've called them myself, right? I've told myself what they are. I've called myself those names. And so when he said, I want to use this, I was not ready for that. And I just kind of tucked that away for quite some time. I continued to develop my relationship. I get up every morning at 6:30, 7 o'clock, depending on how I feel, and spend usually a couple hours out in the garden with the Lord, and have really established an amazing relationship like I've never had before, never in my whole life. He's given me a grace for other people, because before the affair, I was probably that righteous Christian, right, that would maybe look down on others. I would be the one that I was afraid to come out to, right? Afraid to be seen by, and
to be
God
shamed by, right?
Right.
Yeah,
Right. Like, I know what they're thinking, because I was probably one of those people thinking it, right? And so he has given me a grace and a compassion so much for people who are living in shame, that I want to help them come out of that. So this last summer, I would say the big breaking point where I really got complete victory, Jayme, was I had read a book called Dangerous Prayers. And one of those prayers by Craig Gorshell, one of those prayers is, Lord, break me. And that was a scary prayer. But I said, okay, I've committed to reading this Dangerous Prayers book. I'm going to do this. I began praying it. Well, within a month, I had a moment where we were looking for a place to stay for the month while we were home with our family. And there was a couple that had said to our friends, hey, we have this little cabin. They could go stay there while they're home. We'd love to help missionaries out. And then when the friends told them who I was, they said, no, she can't come.
Yeah.
And I was devastated. Right. I held it all together while I was talking to my friends, and my friends knew about my relation, what I had done. I had actually been very honest with this couple. And so they already knew about my affair, and they knew my road to repentance and how God had been changing in my life. And so they talked me through it, and I'm like, yeah, okay, well, I'm supposed to go speak at the church that they go to, and we're supposed to speak about missions. And now maybe I shouldn't. Maybe I should just go run and hide, was how I was feeling of, I'm done, Lord. Like, I can't do this. And I remember coming home, and we left their house. I held it together while we were there. And we left their house, and we were in the car, and Junior was driving. And I just began to bawl and weep because it broke me. It really did. And I got home. I fought with Junior for a minute. It wasn't anything he did. Nothing he could say was perfect in that moment. And I went into a room, and I shut the door, and I laid on the ground, and I was curled up in a ball. And I said, see, God, this is what people think of me. And I laid there for a while. And then it was like he said, and it wasn't even very gentle. It was, get up. All right, get up. I'm not done with you yet. And so I sat up, and I said, what do you want me to do, Lord? What do you want me to do? And he said, I want you to share your story. I want you to be honest and open with people, because people need to hear it. And so I wasn't going to go to that church initially. I said, nope, I'm just done. I'm not going to go to churches that know my past. They know who I was before the divorce. They didn't even know everything about it, because nobody knew. They just knew I had gotten a divorce and I had left. I went and I shared my testimony, and I said, this is what, I didn't go into deep detail, but I shared my testimony. And I tell you what, 3 people came up to me afterwards and said, I needed to hear that I lived like this, or I was living in shame. Or somebody came up to me afterwards and said, my daughter came today, and she's been dealing with depression and almost suicidal, and she was weeping while you were talking. And so I know that God can use my story, but it took being broken to be willing to speak it out loud. And from there, I shared with each of my children. I sat down with each of my children and talked to them and confessed what I had done and asked for their forgiveness. I confessed to my parents, asked for their forgiveness. Just even recently, I was talking with somebody I hadn't seen in years, and we were playing games, and, people don't know why we had gotten a divorce. And I was open and honest. I said, this is what I was going through. This is what I did. This is where God saved me from. And I'm so thankful for his grace. Those people were able to respond and say, we love you, and came around me. So healing does take time.
Right.
Self-forgiveness is the hardest part. But the less we talk about it, the more Satan has control. The more we feel isolated, and the more isolated we feel, the more victory Satan has over us in our lives. It's recognizing that other people go through. They might not have gone through an affair, but they might have had something else that they're going through. And that's where the New Clothes podcast came from, because Zechariah tells us that we are given new clothes, and we are given power over this temple, So through this whole process, we're given new clothes, we're given power over the temple, and we hear in the New Testament that we are the temple of the Lord. So God has given us power over our mind and over our body, and even over the courtyard, which he's told me, well, those are the people that are in your area. They're your children, they're your community, they're the people that you work with. You can pray powerful prayers over them. But specifically, the Lord showed me how much power I had over my own temple. I am the temple of the Lord. I have been given authority over it. I don't have to live that way anymore. I do have new clothes on today. I don't wear those old clothes anymore. And so sharing with you, it's each time I share, it becomes easier for me. You know, it's Satan just loses that grasp that he has on me. He can't whisper those lies anymore. And I know those things. There are going to be people who will reject me, and that's okay, because I've learned that that's on them and that's not on me. Right. My value comes from my Father, and he's purified my heart. He's made me clean, and he uses imperfect people.
And you're no longer self-rejecting. People may reject you, and like you said, that's beyond your control, but you're no longer self-rejecting. You're healing. And by sharing your story and breaking the silence, each, those layers of shame can be checked. And the people that you can help, just like the girl weeping, or, your ripple effect is huge, because I think that last piece of self-forgiveness, forgiveness is the biggest gift we can give ourselves. It is freedom. It is inner peace. And unless we forgive ourselves, we suffer.
Right.
And yeah.
And part of forgiving ourselves, it means, okay, now I am that new creature. I'm now forming new habits. For me, even before I went through the healing process, when I stopped with all those guys and the adultery, I put blocks on my to protect me, to protect my current husband, where I don't speak to men on the computer that I don't know. I don't speak to any male figure after 10 unless it's my brother. Whether you're a good friend or you're a worker, one of our staff here, if it's after 10 o'clock, I don't need to be speaking with another man, and I just don't even respond. I set up different limits and different guards for myself. But because of who I am now, I know my needs, and I know there's no way in hell, I'm going to use that word, there's no way in hell that I will go back to that, because my life was so miserable. Even in the moment, like, you could look like you're having fun and you think that, somebody having an affair is usually, I think they're really broken people. I had issues that I didn't know how to deal with. I think from when I was younger, I'd always been, I developed early. So boys always noticed my body. I knew I had power with my body. It was something that I always struggled with a sexual sin, and that was mine. And so I think that I don't know why I went down that road, Jayme. I don't know why. But I do know that I have been saved from it. I do know that I have a gracious God that's forgiven me, that has made me a new person. And like I said, with the new clothes, I do know that I'm not wearing those filthy clothes anymore. I have been given clean clothes. I do wear the righteousness of Christ. I do have that difference. And so I have found that my value comes from him, and my value comes from being his daughter, not even in what I do. Like, I used to find my value when I was a massage therapist, and then the Lord stripped that from me and said, no, you're going to let go of that and become this missionary. I didn't want to become that missionary. I had been called to be a missionary since I was 4. You can ask my mother. I told her, I proclaimed it when I was 4, that I was going to be a missionary. But it wasn't on my radar at this moment in my life, especially walking through all that. It was like, no. So then I started finding that, and then with all the insecurities in Haiti, now sometimes I'm outside and I'm trying to find, well, if my value isn't in massage, and now my value isn't in, well, what if I'm not in country and able to mission, quote unquote? Well, then what's my value? And God is like, don't you get it? That's just things you do.
Yeah.
Your value is what I give you. It's
Right.
your value is that you are Jayme Sinsmyr, daughter of the king. That's your value. Everything
Mhm.
else is what you do.
Mhm.
It's not what your value is. And so he's just been taking me on a crazy ride. My word for this year is dance. And dance seems like a funny word, but it really to me
Yeah,
ends up
explain
being
that. Where did that come from?
right.
Right.
So like, I don't know if you have a word for the year, but I
A
kept
different one every day. I'm too, my mind can't stay focused for a whole year.
right. Last year was listen. I have these weird words, listen, and I'm like, okay, listen. So I really did learn to meditate on his word and listen to him, not just pray, speaking, but actually have silent time and listen to his word, listen to his voice, listen to him. And this year, when I really felt like the word dance come to my mind, I'm like, I'm so weird. Why do you give me, Lord, you give me weird words. But if you think about it, dance, I'm more talking about like a ballroom dance, right? Where the man leads the woman. And in a good dance couple, the man is constantly choreographing this dance as they go. They don't know the steps before, right? And if the woman allows the man to lead her, excuse me, she looks beautiful. She's graceful. He's floating her across the floor and making her look as beautiful as she can in front of the audience. But if she pushes and pulls and she wants to go left when he's trying to tell her to go right and she doesn't know all like the little cues, it's not so graceful. It's clumsy and it doesn't look great and you're stepping on somebody's toes and it's just not as fun, right? And so it really turns out to be surrender. It's when I tell you to go here, go here. When I tell you to go there, and trust that I'm here to make your life beautiful, that I have good for you, that I want to make you shine. And I want you just to completely surrender. And so learning those little cues, right now I was in the States a lot this last 6 months because of the insecurities in Haiti here. My neighborhood kids are coming out, sorry.
Okay.
So there's a lot of insecurities, a lot of kidnappings, a lot of gangs control 70% of the area that we live in. And so I'm in that small 30% that's not being controlled, but they're encroaching. And so it's not super safe for me to be here. And I really was angry at God. I was angry at my husband for keeping me out. And then I was ready to come back. I was not ready to come back in. And then he said, okay, come back in. And it's like, Lord, you're just messing with me. But it's all, I think he's just teaching me, like, I'm going to dance. I'm going to help you dance. And so when we come back out this February, we have a meeting with our board and we'll probably be out for a while, but we're homeless when we're in the States. Our home is here in Haiti. And so again, it's just that surrender of where do you want us to land? Where are we going to stay? How are we going to do this? What are we doing? But God has always been faithful. And so it's just, I laugh at myself and I say, stop being an Israelite. God's been faithful and he's going to be faithful next time. You don't need to go back to Egypt. Just keep walking, just keep following, just keep allowing him to lead. And in that surrender comes freedom actually as well. And it comes, the stress leaves you when we want to be in control and I want to tell him which way we should dance. I tend to have a lot more stress. I tend to have a lot more frustration and I carry a lot more anxiety. And when I let him just lead and say, okay, God, you know where I need to be and when I need to be there, I lose that anxiety. I lose that stress. I lose. So in that dance, in that surrender comes that peace, really.
And I see you just stepping out in your faith with a tremendous amount of trust.
Mm-hmm.
And with that trust, I think that you have been able to find a lot of forgiveness through in so many different ways.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. And I commend you for that. It's really, you're brave. You're very brave for coming out and sharing your story. And tell me a little bit how does it feel now with the level of forgiveness that you have as you've kind of evolved from your real breaking point, when you really finally realized, I picture you, coming home and closing the door, behind your husband, and having that moment. From that moment forward, how have you progressed in your forgiveness to yourself?
One thing I would say is very different now in my life since coming out, since taking that first step. When I would go home from, we live in Haiti, I'd go home, I'd see my family. When I would see my children, there would always be this thing in the back of my mind. If they only knew, right? If they only knew. And I never felt like I could just sit and rest with them. I always had to be the best when I was there. And I had to make sure that, everything was perfect. And I didn't want to, there was just so much pressure internally on me. And now when I go back, it's light. Everybody knows. If they want to talk about it to me, they can talk about it. They don't have to, make it okay. They have their struggle. They have to work through it. But we can talk about it. We can be open. We can share. And so there's a lightness that I have. There's so much more. Each step of the healing process, I feel like you're able to soar a little higher. Right. When you're so imprisoned, it's like you're a bald eagle and you're one at the zoo, right? And your leg is chained to that post, and you can't fly away no matter how hard you want to try. And then maybe you haven't flown for many years, but you've got the chain is off now, but you're not strong enough. You can't really fly high enough to soar. You can kind of fly, you're feeling it, you're getting it. But I would say today, I feel like I'm soaring. I feel like God has given me such a lightness about my past. Do I still have regrets? Do I still have moments? Of course. There's times where I feel like, ugh. But right. Do I have a good life? God has redeemed so much in my life, Jayme. He's redeemed my current marriage. We used, like I said, man, when we started, we were two broken people and we fought a lot. As much as we were like passionate in love, we were angry and hot and quick, and we have our own story of healing. That's a whole nother story, but God has brought us through where we are just now a powerhouse for him, where we are each other's match. What I'm good at is not his skill. What he's good at is not mine. And the Lord has redeemed that. I feel like he's redeemed my family. He's redeemed relationships. He's redeemed even my old house. I was able to find out that somebody I know bought our old house where I raised my kids, and she's now raising her kids there, and it's close to her family. And from when she bought it, she actually donated towards our ministry with some extra funds that she had when she bought it. And it was like the Lord said, I've even given you back your house. I've even redeemed your house. He's just a good God. He's a good Father. And he wants us to be set free. He doesn't want us to live in these chains. Christ died on the cross for us to set us free. He doesn't want us to live in this shame. He doesn't want you and I think we talk mostly to us women. And I think there's so many women. I know women who have had abortions and they've never told anybody. And they, I had somebody on my massage table one time tell me that, and she was a Christian lady and nobody knew. And she released it while I was doing the massage, and her body just, you could just feel that hurt and that shame over her body. And I have another lady that said, I had to go through trauma. I still don't tell a lot of people, but I'm willing to tell people now. It's hard. There's people sitting in our churches, who feel extremely alone, that if somebody knew their past, the church would reject them. But the church is a place for healing. It should be a hospital. It should be the place where when we're wounded, we can come and we can be honest. And so it's not that we shouldn't hold people accountable. I'm not saying that. I totally agree that we should hold people accountable, But when somebody's come through something, they've come through it, they need to be able to say, I've been redeemed and God has forgiven me. This was my past. It's not who I am today. And be open, be welcome with open arms in the church, because that's, without Christ, that's all of us, you know, big or little, big or little.
Yeah. I hear, though, your tremendous power that you have gotten through being accountable. Like, your accountability has given you power to step out and to do a lot of really good, amazing things that God is calling you to do. And that has got to be a huge factor in the healing process and forgiving yourself. Yeah. So it's a lot of, I mean, to stand in your own truth and take responsibility the way that you have is amazing.
Yeah. You know, God gave me a dream. It was actually just this last December. I thought it was a very demonic dream. It really set me off for a couple days. I was really heavy in the spirit. And initially I thought the dream was a half person, half snake. And it was laying in the ground. And then I had been praying over it the last, like, a couple days, because I don't get dreams like that. It was really, like I said, it was really creepy and demonic. And then I had just this really heavy spirit for a few days. And I'm like, Lord, I don't know what that was. What was that? And he said, look again. And when I looked and like really thought about the dream, it was a woman and she was laying in the dirt and a snake had coiled around her. Not like in one spot where like a boa constrictor would squeeze off the life, but like, you know, it started at the top and it worked down her body. And the head was up by her head, so it could whisper in her ear. But she was basically comatose, just looking in the dirt. And when I was looking at her, she's just looking up at me, blinking. And she's silent. And she's really being held captive by that snake, living in the dirt, living down in the mud and the mire, right?
No.
And it was like, you are here to help set those women free.
Yeah.
And then, and it just keeps coming back to me, that vision. And a couple nights ago, I was going through a meditation time, and it was talking about what are your goals and what are you doing in life. And I saw a retreat center, and I saw different places. And then I saw that I had that picture of the woman with a snake on there. There was a whole bunch of them around, and they were getting up from outside of those snakes. They were stomping on them, and they were standing up in freedom. And it was like God had given me part of the vision a while ago, and I had to really feel how deep and how dark that was, you know, for several days. And then this last time, when I was just meditating on where do you want me to go with my future, and how do you want me to take the podcast, where, you know, I mean, my goal is to set people free, to be used by God to set people free. I can't do it, but Christ can. And when I saw that, it was like he said, now look, they're coming up. The snakes have lost their power. Yeah. And these women are standing up. They're no longer in the dark, in the mud. They're no longer comatose, just allowing Satan. Because I think sometimes, whether you have sometimes people have done things to you. Sometimes we just have, you know, it might not be sexual. It might be just emotional. Somebody has done an emotional control on you. But we just lay in the dirt, and we don't even realize there's a battle for our brain. There's a battle for our mind. And Satan is fighting us. And Satan wants to keep us down in that dirt. He doesn't want us to get up and rejoice. He doesn't want us to get up and flourish. But God wants abundance for us. God wants freedom for us. He doesn't want us down in that dirt. And so finding that now, to me, is the most exciting thing. Yeah. To know that me being freed doesn't stop with me. Now I can say, let me help you walk out of shame. Let me help you stand up and be the woman God wants you to be, because he doesn't want you to be helpless. He doesn't want you to be silent. He wants you to speak.
Mhm.
And I think that is empowering. That's how we empower each other, is we speak our truth. We speak the things, the bad things and the good things. And that both of those things make us who we are.
Yeah.
I was watching Edith Edgar a while ago, and she said to write a letter to the person who hurt you and tell them everything bad that they did to you and how angry it made you feel and how awful it was to you. And then write a second letter. Come back a day or two later and write a second letter and tell them, thank you, not necessarily for what they did, but for the lessons you learned from it. And that's what I look at. These men that I allowed in my life, I can see definitely, yes, I allowed it, but I was also in a very vulnerable and
Right.
crazy situation.
Mhm.
And some things were pushed on that probably that I just don't even like to talk about. But
Mhm.
I had to write a letter to that person, and I had to then say, like I said before, thank you. Because before I did all this, I was a self-righteous person, and I was not as compassionate as I am now. And I wouldn't be where I am today if I didn't go through that.
Mhm.
And so even those hard times in our life, even those dark times, they form us. And we can choose how they form us. We can stay that victim, or we can become the survivor, and we can help other people survive. And, we can have compassion on other people, and we can
Right.
be used by God. God
Yeah.
does not use any perfect people. The only person I find in my Bible that's perfect is Jesus. And all those other people he used, and they are so far from perfect. And so if he can use them, he can use me, he can use you. He can use the person listening to us today who thinks she is nothing. God
Right.
says, no, you're not nothing. You're so valuable. You're so worthy. And I love you. He loves you. He loves the person that's listening to us today. He loves the person who's hiding in the pew, might be going to church every Sunday or in the chairs and is hiding. He loves you. He loves you compassionately. And he runs after you. He pursues you. He pursues me, and he pursues each person here. And we serve a great God, Jayme, and he wants to set us free.
Yeah. I was going to ask any parting words, but boy, you wrapped it up beautifully. I feel that I love the idea and the picture I have in my head right now. It's that God will not force himself on us. He's there whenever we are ready. We just have to invite him in. And when we do, we also invite healing. We also understand that we are enough, and we are deeply loved, and that self-love has to back in, and it can't come from the outside world. It can only come from God and all that forgiveness.
Yeah, it's loving ourselves the way God loves us, seeing ourselves the way God sees us. When we look in the mirror in the morning, do we see the woman God sees? And I think that I challenge everybody listening, look in the mirror and use your eyes as if they were God's eyes, and look at yourself. Find as much love. You know how you look at something like your kid when you're like, oh, I just love you so much, and you can feel it in your eyes. You can feel the love just pouring out of your eyes. Look at yourself like that in the mirror, because that's how God sees you.
I love that you say that, because I will think that sometimes, how crazy it is that is how God feels towards each and every one of us, that accept it, that he feels that way about us. But I think it's a good reminder, accept that he feels that way about every single person walking on this earth, right? That is a good reminder for all of us that I'm thinking of the old Alanis Morissette song where she says, I'm a sinner, I'm a saint.
Yeah.
And your hell and your dreams. I mean, we all are.
We all are. We all are. And I think
traditionally.
Yeah. So as women, I think that that's exactly it, is we need to look at other women and not we can tend to be jealous of each other, of oh, like my value depends on the person next to me, right? If this person is more pretty than me, then I'm not quite as pretty. If that person's less pretty than me, like, oh man, I'm really good looking compared to her. We're constantly comparing. And instead of comparing, let's just look at each other with love. Let's just, light each other's candles, right? We don't have to snuff out our sister's candle. If they're doing something that the same thing we're doing, great. Encourage them. We're both are doing podcasts. And we're encouraging each other, right? I'm not afraid of you taking my audience, and I don't think you're afraid of me taking your audience. There's enough for all of us. God is an abundant God. And so we don't have to be worried about that type of stuff. And I think that that's such a healthy spot to be when we love ourselves enough that we don't need you to value me. Now then I can give you more value because I'm in a healthy spot in my life. I don't need you to value me. So now I know I'm valuable. I can love you no matter what. Jayme, you're way more gorgeous than I am. And I'm okay with that. I just think you're a gorgeous woman. And God has blessed you.
You are kind. You're very kind. When you talk like that, I think about how it's you just grab onto someone's hand, and there's just those days where you're pulling someone along, and then the next day they're pulling you along, and you just you don't let go. And it's that empowerment that we need each other.
We need each other. God makes us to be community, right? And that's that trick of the devil, right? That's that lie of that nobody will accept you as you are. You start losing real community. You might be going to book clubs, you might be going and hanging out with your girlfriends, but if they don't truly know you, there's a part of you that's very, very lonely. It needs community. It needs accepted. That little girl within inside us, and I could go on forever, but
thank you so much for sharing your story.
Thank you.
Really, really appreciate your honesty and your vulnerability. So once again, your podcast is New Clothes, but you're changing up the name a little bit. Tell us about that.
Yeah, it's New Clothes. Empowering women to walk out of shame. So New Clothes, empowering women to walk out of shame. So the whole deal with the new clothes is, like I said, it's we are not who we used to be, and God's given us the power. And so we already have it in us. If we have the Holy Spirit living in us, we are already empowered women, and we don't need to walk in shame anymore. So that's where we're at. That's the New Clothes podcast.
Amazing. And I love it because you've got all kinds of little fear not and verses every day, just quick and to the point, and something to stick with you every day. It's amazing. Yeah. So thank you once again. I know you have inspired and touched so many hearts today. So thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. Love you.
Love you.
Bye.
Thank you so much for being here as we kick off this podcast together. I really appreciate you joining me on this journey because I'm well aware you could be doing or listening to anything right now. Hey, if you enjoy the Authentically Raw content, please support the show by following, rating, and reviewing on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. You can also follow me on social media for daily inspiration. Head over to my website, jaymebarris.com, to sign up for weekly transformation tips. Or if you're interested in coaching, I currently have 3 openings for one-on-one coaching. If you're looking for an empowering community, we'd love for you to join us in the Transformation Tribe, our group coaching membership. More info available on my website under the Life Coaching and Membership tabs. One last thing, I'm rooting for you. Be real, be raw, be authentic.